Olá, Warriors que acompanham a gente comendo, gente. Estamos aqui nesse vídeo super especial em comemoração aos 30 anos, né, da série, né, de 1995 a 2025, já se foram 30 anos, né, e esse vídeo super especial que a gente conseguiu aí entrar em contato com alguém que trabalhou no show, né, isso aqui é muito importante, né, a gente já teve várias entrevistas, vários vídeos com outros fãs, né, o que também é ótimo, assistam também, né, a gente tem muito contato com outros fãs brasileiros, né, aqui no canal, na Xena com Brasil, então, né, é sempre bom ouvir de fã para fã, né, e foi um prazer imensurável, inarrável, né, ouvir, né, de quem trabalhou lá no show, né, desde o primeiro contato que a gente fez com o Steven, desde a primeira mensagem que a gente conseguiu entrar em contato com ele sempre foi muito receptivo, um amor. Ele falou, não, cara, não, tipo, né, eu sei que vocês estão no Brasil e o fuso horário é diferente, mas a gente vai dar um jeito, a gente vai conseguir um dia, um horário pra gente poder estar conversando sobre a série, né? A gente chama de entrevista, mas na verdade foi um grande bate-papo sobre a série, né? É chegar e conversar com outro fã, né? A diferença é que foi em inglês, ele estava lá nos Estados Unidos, eu aqui no Rio de Janeiro, né? E mesmo com a minha dificuldade, eu estava muito insegura, né, de estar falando com ele pelo nervosismo de ser ele, pelo nervosismo de estar falando inglês, né, o tempo inteiro muito insegura, né, com o meu vocabulário, né, com será que eu estou fazendo as perguntas certas, será que eu estou conseguindo me comunicar direito com ele, será que ele está me entendendo? E no final deu tudo certo, ele me entendeu, eu entendi ele, a conversa fluiu e foi maravilhoso. Então, apesar de todas essas dificuldades geográficas, linguísticas, foi um prazer imenso estar ali falando com o Steven, né? E desde o primeiro momento ele foi um fofo, receptivo, maravilhoso. Lembra do que eu falo sobre a Lucy, no dia da Lucy, gente? Que desde o primeiro momento que a Lucy apareceu, a Lucy estava ali de braços abertos com os fãs, né? Aquele momento ali com os fãs no Pirmauá em 2012 foi um sonho. Esse momento aqui com o Steven também foi um sonho, né? É muito prazeroso falar de Xena com quem ama essa série, e o Steven tem um orgulho, um amor tão grande, você sente isso no olhar dele. Eu estava, né, em outro país, né, conversando com ele através do celular, e no olhar dele eu senti o orgulho que ele tem de fazer parte dessa história, né? Então, ter tido essa oportunidade de falar com ele, né, gravar, ter esses minutos do dia dele, para a gente poder estar gravando esse momento e deixar aqui com vocês, foi um sonho maravilhoso. E o Steven, além de ter trabalhado na série, ele é um grande fã, né, de todo o legado da série, de tudo que a série representa para os outros fãs. Isso é um sonho, né, e a gente tem muito orgulho de estar trazendo isso aqui para vocês. Então, espero que vocês gostem e feliz 30 anos de Xena para todos vocês, Xenites. Warriors e Xenites recomendam. Esse vídeo foi feito com muito carinho para vocês. Um abraço, um beijo em todos.
Xenites recomendam.
Okay. I know it's actually possible for you to record from your side, but I have to set that up under sharing. And one participant can share simultaneously. Yeah, that's it's better to do it this way. So I'll put it up on a cloud and I'll just send you a link to it. So that was fun.
And we are talking about Sins of the Past, that we are talking about Xena really, the first time Xena saw Gabrielle and what she felt back on that moment.
Right.
You were talking about it.
So to pick up kind of where I left off here, I'm going to go back a little bit because I don't know exactly where it clipped us. So going back to the earlier episodes where Gabrielle saw Xena as a legend and did not know exactly who Xena really was, didn't know what was under the surface. Xena at that time was completely lost because she didn't know who she was either. She had like lived half of her life as a lie. Was she really this destroyer of nations, or was she just somebody trying to survive? She didn't know. So when she sees Gabrielle confronting Draco's men, something about Gabrielle sparks in Xena, because that looks like what she was at one time. It's kind of like, yeah, that's familiar. So that's why Xena's initially attracted to Gabrielle. It's a reflection of herself and perhaps who she could have been. Gabrielle is attracted to Xena initially because, again, the legend. Gabrielle is a storyteller. She's wanted to live these adventures, and oh my gosh, here's one of the legendary people. And yes, I know she supposedly slaughtered these people and she killed these villagers and she did that. Okay, I know in the Battle of Corinth, she destroyed the Amazon nation and she almost destroyed the Centaur nation. Okay, I know that. But this is an adventure. So by the time we got to the price, one of the things I was trying to write in that was the realization that Gabrielle was going to inevitably have about the real Xena who has existed for the last 15 years or so. And some of this, by the way, is a reflection of the fact that I have mentioned I was in a military family. And you have to recognize that your father, in my case, was a warrior. And he went off to war and he did things that, you know, I can think of he's great, he's my dad. I've seen the war movies and I know how brave they are, but no, it's not like that. So there was a moment in my life when I realized that my dad had probably done a lot of things that I had only imagined were glorious. So with Xena, there was that moment when Xena's going completely crazy and saying, kill them all, survival is the only thing here. She's reverted back to that warrior status because that is something she's familiar with. She may not like it, but it's comfortable. A lot of people do that. A lot of people will go back to the things that hurt them only because they're familiar, not because they want to. So suddenly Gabrielle sees this and sees that viciousness. And so the question is, as I was putting earlier, the question is, will Gabrielle continue to be with her? Will she follow Xena after that, after she realizes it? That seems to be the obvious question. But in fact, the real question is directly to Gabrielle, and that is, who are you? What kind of person are you? And there's this one line which is in the script. Renee did such a wonderful job with it, where they're talking about the fact that they just realized that Kaltaka is water, that these dying horde soldiers aren't crying out for a war god, they want water. And this is a common thing on battlefields. You're losing fluids and you just want water. And so when this is revealed to her, and she realizes these men out there are suffering, they're dying, and all they're asking for is water. And Gabrielle says, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die as who I am. She defined herself right there. She said, I'm going to go against what Xena said. I'm not going to stay here and hide. I'm not going to let her protect me. If I'm going to die, I am going to die as I am, who I am. And she grabs up the water and she goes out and she tries to help. That was the moment that Gabrielle changed. She realized who Xena really was, but she realized that who she is was much more important. Those are the building blocks. After that moment, she may have left Xena. That's a possibility just in human nature. But with that realization, she also was able to see that Xena was damaged, that Xena was also struggling, that she was trying to find her path. And suddenly the characters are now starting to come together.
Yes. And I think in that moment, and Xena and show really admiration for Gabrielle because she stands against her. She's not afraid of Xena at all after even realizing that Xena can even kill me now, but I will do what I believe is right.
Yeah.
Even if this is against her, and I believe that Xena looked at that and just, oh my God, this girl she's not a little girl anymore. No, she already changed a lot since of the past. Yeah. And Xena have this admiration for her and really admire Gabrielle for her strength and this feeling that I gonna stand for what I believe is right. It's not what you want me to do, but what I believe is right. It's really a moment, a really impactful moment for them.
Yeah, and the interpretation for Xena, again, she's looking at this little girl and saying, when did I miss that? When did that happen to me and I just made the wrong choice? you know? So there's a part of Xena that is now, at that point, Xena has become a little bit of the student. She's now learning.
Yeah.
So the way I've kind of put out the difference between the two as far as the journey is concerned is that Xena was somebody who was lost in the darkness of evil, of war, slaughter, killing. She was lost, and she was desperately trying to find herself back to the light. Gabrielle came from the light. She was in a simple village. Everything was peaceful. It was boring, but it was peaceful. It was predictable. You know, before the warlords came along, everything was as it should be. But she chose to travel toward the darkness because of this person. So Xena was trying to find the light. Gabrielle chose to go into the darkness because she saw somebody who was in need and somebody who resonated with her on some level. So in one sense, you could look at that and you can say, which story is more heroic? The one who chooses to try to find the light so that they can take away all the pain, or the person that says, I choose to walk through the pain. I can walk through those flames because I have the strength to be there for someone else.
That's fantastic. I believe both are humans. No, just that's a thing that I'm not saying bad things about Hercules, but some fans say Hercules is kind of boring because he's always doing the right thing. People compares people that I know. I don't know if people in other countries, other fans make this comparison, but they say Hercules is like Superman. Superman, he always the great guy. He never made mistakes, never kill anyone. And Hercules from Kevin Sorbo is like that. He's had that strength, and for him everything's that plain. You know, everything's here. There's no up, there's no down. Hercules here. And we, the Xena fans, will say that Xena and Gabrielle, they do this. You know, it's not like it's not a line. You know, they go through ups and downs, and that's what makes them not perfect. They are not perfect characters at all. They make mistakes. They fight with each other. They fight with other people, but that makes them humans.
Right. And that's one of the big differences with Hercules. You pointed that out. First of all, Hercules, that's our big brother. I always give credit. Without Hercules, Xena would not have existed. That is our big brother. Everybody who worked on that show, I just admire them quite a bit. The character, however, was an extremely difficult one to write. The reason for it is exactly what you just said. This character was good. It had goodness. It was hard to find the darkness in that character because it was good. As a writer, it's hard to find that identifiability. You have to really work at it. And I think actually the writers on Hercules did a really good job with what they had, with that particular premise. On Xena, we had the darkness. That was right there. So we had a lot to play with. But if you'll notice on Hercules, even in their progression, later on in their series, they started to put Hercules in situations that did not have easy solutions. They started to put Hercules into positions that were darker, that had him question himself, and also the pantheon of gods that he was born into. But there was always that advantage that Xena had in that regard. So it's easy to kind of look at Hercules as being more of a light show. But I can tell you, as somebody who has written for other shows where the characters are really, really good, or if you write like an animated show for children, you really cannot have incredibly dark villains in those shows. It's extremely difficult to pull that kind of a character off. So I give them a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, I think Hercules is a great character and a great show. I really believe that perfect match for Xena was him, because he was the golden guy. Everybody wanna be happy with him, but there's this thing that Xena and Gabrielle are soulmates and they must be with each other. But if Gabrielle didn't exist at all, Hercules would be the perfect guy for her, even better than Ares.
It would have been a kind of an interesting exploration, Hercules and Xena, as a series. I'm not sure. That would have been a completely different series, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's different, yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
interesting.
But I believe if they would be a good match if there's no other the other things the life didn't happen for them, they would be a good match. I really it's like you said, Hercules is our big brother. It's just there's no but at least for me, I really enjoy the show and the character itself. It's amazing. Just really grateful for Hercules itself and everybody who working on the show because they are great shows. Both Xena, Hercules, young Hercules. I believe the people who worked on really made their best and if we need to talk about it when Kevin gets sick and Lucy gets pregnant, I imagine that was really complicated for the writers show, write the show when the leaders of the show are not exactly on the Hercules, Kevin was sick, so and Lucy was pregnant, so it was really creative. It's really a creative moment for the writer to make this happen in both shows. It's
Yeah.
really fantastic.
And a lot
Really
of credit of
fantastic.
that actually goes to Rob Tappert because Rob was, both shows were being overseen by Rob Tappert, Sam Raimi also, but mostly Rob was the one who was making those decisions. Sam was doing movies. And so when we started to get into those situations, for example, when Kevin did have I think it was an aneurysm, and had to be out for a few episodes. And there was an episode of Xena that we hadn't written yet. We were talking about writing. And so Rob came to our staff meeting. Rob was our staff meeting. He oversaw it. So it wasn't like he came into us. He called a staff meeting. And he pointed out this was going on with Kevin, and they needed to have an episode that was kind of light for Kevin. And he said, I want to use that idea on Hercules. And because that way it'll take a load off of Kevin. And we were like, yeah, absolutely, take it. And the idea, which they did on Hercules, and they did a great job with it, it was set in modern day when Kevin Sorbo had disappeared and everybody was trying to find him because he played Hercules and they didn't know where he was. Now,
Yeah.
now the Xena version of that was going to be something similar. And we were going to have our regular actors play the roles of the producers. I think Bruce Campbell played Rob Tappert, and Hudson played Liz Friedman. The interesting thing is because I was doing so many different conventions, I was being invited to conventions, and I was always trying to make time to be out there so I could talk to the fans. And I became kind of the face on that, but it was funny that I was always in another state or another country doing a convention. There was the actor who was going to play me was actually going to be me, except it was just going to be in a speakerphone. The idea being is that I was never there. I was always somewhere else. So you just hear my voice in a speakerphone. But that was in the Xena version. So that worked great for Hercules, and it was one of their best episodes, I think. I still laugh at that episode.
I watched this one, and there's two episodes when this happened. There's one with Renee appeared, and they are in kind of like camping, and there's two episodes when this happened. It's really, really great episodes. This kind of, it's fun. No, it is fun that we see these moments when the show is not exactly only punches and kicks and we see the actors having fun on the set. It's just that, they are playing and making jokes with self. And he always said that Bruce was making Tarpet and Tarpet watching that he must laugh a lot, because I believe the jokes that we have in this episode was something that he already heard before, and they try to put there to make fun of the joke. I believe it's something to this. I don't know if I say something wrong.
Well, I can't look directly at Hercules and say how they did that particular aspect. I know with our show, we were very much in sync and very scripted. So a lot of times the jokes that came out, we put them right into the script. So it certainly wasn't something they just came up with on the set. But when Lucy became pregnant, this was another situation because in most TV shows, when an actress becomes pregnant, they come up with reasons why she's not in the episode, or they hide her behind a desk, or, you know. And so Rob came in and told us that Lucy was pregnant, and we realized that by the schedule, she was going to start showing while we were shooting. And Rob just said, I don't want to hide it. Let's embrace it. Xena has gotten pregnant. Let's do stories around that. And we went, all right, let's do it. So we did something that was not typical at the time. We embraced that particular aspect and said, we're going to go with this. Why hide it? You know, these things happen. Why would you hide that? It's an essential part of these particular characters, especially when you talk about the way that they care for each other, and the challenges with each other, but also the very, very heavy family aspect of who they are. They both had kids. They both had disagreements. They both had infanticide, patricide. We were all over the place with those things. But yeah, we didn't shy around for those things. And many times, it's funny, RJ and I would talk about this. We'd laugh about it. That Rob would come in sometimes and say, I want to do this. And it was such a bizarre, outlandish, ridiculous idea. And then RJ and I would go off to a bar, I think it was House of Blues where we used to go to. And we would sit there and we would say, how are we going to do this? And then we would figure out a way to do it. And then we'd come back and present it to Rob, and Rob would make his changes, and we ended up doing it. So I always appreciated the fact that Rob would just throw out bizarre ideas that forced us to be more creative, and that he allowed us to throw out these bizarre ideas. And even though we would laugh and make jokes about each other, we would take them seriously. We try to find a way to make them work. And I think that's one of the reasons why Xena was exceptional. We were pushing into areas that most TV series would say, no, let's play it safe. And we're like, no, we don't want to play it safe. We want to have fun.
Exactly. I really, people say this kind of episode that is not exactly the normal, the usual, are kind of too strange or too boring, but I think they're the best. No, like the bittersweet, I believe that was really a challenge because you put a musical on the show. My God, a musical in the middle of the season. I believe this is fantastic. And could you say something about the bittersweet? Who came with the idea? Let's put a musical on the show. Who came with this?
Okay, well, keep in mind, TV series, there have been a few TV series before then that had done musical episodes. Moonlighting, a series in the 80s, did it as well. What we did differently is that we did an entire episode where the majority of everything was lyricized as it was music. Once they were in Illusia, all the other characters spoke in rhymes. But we also did original music. We didn't borrow from pop music. Later on, there was another Xena episode where it was basically pop music, and it was regular music, but it was done in a Xena style. But this was all original. And this was, once again, Rob. Rob came in and he goes, I want to do a musical. And so we were like, okay, let's figure this out. And myself and Chris Mannheim, we were the ones to write the script. Now, both Chris and myself, we have theater backgrounds. So we've been around musicals. We've been around this type of experience. And so we had to start writing toward that. Now, at the same time, Joe LaDuca and had two lyricists that he was working with. And gosh, I'm ashamed of myself because I'm going to look over here if I can find their names. I always forget their names, and they deserve a heck of a lot of credit on coming up with these songs along with Joe. But anyway, I'll see if I can find that in a moment. So what Chris and I had to do is we had to come up with the overall concept of how this story would lay out, but also the reason for the story. There's a very important reason why we did a musical at that time. At that point in our series, the two characters had every reason to hate each other because of their kids, and it just like they absolutely, that's the end of our series right there. They can't travel together. They hate each other. So what we had to do was we had to find a way to repair that. Now, the bad way to have done it, which would have been the most common way to have done it, would have done an episode where they realize they see, they actually still need to be together and they're going to travel along together and everything is made up and they're okay. They're back to where they started. Most series would do that. They want, at the end of the episode, they're back to who they were. In real life, that doesn't work. In real life, you can't just forget, especially with all the stuff that we had put them through. So we thought, in this particular episode, we have to be more direct and we have to be subtle at the same time. In other words, we need them to actually talk directly to each other, but without doing it, as humans do. We don't talk directly to each other. We talk with masks up, or we talk about other things. Music allows you to do that because music is not just words. Music is feeling. It's emotions. So we thought a musical would be a great way to do this. But here's the important thing. At the end of that episode, it was not our intention to have them back together again. The intention was to clear away all the hatred so they could find each other again. Put them back into a position that they could look at each other and saying, okay, with all of this, are you still worth it? That was what we wanted to do. It was to put them back into the first steps. Erase all the badness, but don't give this fake like, okay, since we erase the badness, we feel everything again, we feel the love again, because that's not real. But we wanted them to get to that point where all the bad was scraped away and they could start over if they chose to do that. Once again, putting it in real terms for how real people react to each other. So there were, I think, 5 psychological steps. When I was in college, my minor was psychology. Again, I'm fascinated with people. But there are basically 5 steps to trying to repair damage like this. And I'm sure the psychologists out there might say, well, there's only, there's 7 steps or whatever. There's different step programs. So there were 5 that I was familiar with. We did not have time to put all 5 in there, but we got 3 of them in there. And to give an example, one of the best ones was when they were in the echo chamber. And the echo chamber, they couldn't hear each other. Every time they started talking, there were echoes going on and they were confronting each other. Well, this is something that happens to people when we're in arguments with somebody. I'm not listening to you because everything you say is an attack on me. And therefore, I'm going to defend myself by telling you what you did to me. So I'm actually talking about the past. And I can't hear you. And you can't hear me. We're accusing each other. And that's what they were doing. Every time they started talking about what they had done to each other. And so finally, Xena says, tell me how you feel right now.
Nothing about the past right now.
And she says, right now. And Gabrielle says, I hurt inside. And the echo stopped. Because she was telling her how she felt right then. That's where the bridge begins. Once they were able to stop accusing each other, they were able to listen to each other.
Yes.
So there was a lot that went into that musical, which was much deeper than just a musical. Even the idea of the War Peace song, which is one of my favorite songs, actually. When Xena finds herself with Ares and she's with an army again, and Gabrielle's back in her village. That goes back to the thing I said earlier, which is sometimes when you are in distress or you don't know where to go, you run home to mama, you run to something familiar. For Gabrielle, that was the safety of her village, even though it was boring. For Xena, that was the safety of an army. She's at the head of an army working with Ares again, but that just wasn't her. And so we're going back and forth showing what they consider to be home, and then eventually it comes together and they confront each other. That's all psychologically based. So, and there was one other thing about the musical I want to mention. Only because I mentioned this at the Xenite retreat. And for all these years, I thought it was something about the musical that was obvious, so I'd never talked about it. And when I mentioned it at the Xenite retreat, which is done every year, the entire crowd of Xena fans gasped. And some of them started to tear up because they realized this thing. I thought everybody knew it. And I will mention this. the entire world of Illusia, everybody in there except Xena and Gabrielle, they sang. They either had a song or they spoke in lyricized ways. They, everything rhymed and everything was musical. It was all musical. Okay, so at the end of the episode, the question has been, who created Illusia? And so you know the answer to that. You know who created Illusia? Solon, Xena's son. And Solon had never known that Xena was his mother, because he passed away without knowing that. But he was now in the afterlife, and he could now see this. So he created this entire world to help them find each other, to help his mother and this woman that he had just met when he was alive find each other again because he loved her. Now, here's the thing. He created that world of Illusia. I want to take you back to Orphan of War, where we first met Solon.
Mm-hmm.
And Solon at that time did not know Xena was his mother. And so there's that moment when they're talking, and Xena wants to know what he does remember. So she asks him, basically, what do you remember about your mother? And he says, I don't. I was a baby. I don't remember much, bits and pieces. And he says, but I remember she used to sing to me. And then he walks away, and you see Xena, and Xena says to herself, I could sing to you. He created a world of music so that he could sing to her.
Oh, yes, that's nice. It's true. And she almost crying when she says this to him, when he walks and she whispers, this I could sing too. She's trying not to cry. She really wants to tell him, I'm your mother.
Yeah. And that was another episode. That episode didn't, that episode was not an easy one as well, because when I wrote that episode, that was once again, Rob came into my office and he said, I want to find out that Xena has a son. And I was like, okay. And I immediately said, I have an idea. Now, this was based on a story I had heard a long time ago about a woman who she was homeless, addicted to drugs. She was living on the streets, and she had a baby. I think it was a daughter. But she knew this would be a horrible life for this baby, so she gave the baby up for adoption. And this wonderful family, adopted the child. 7 or 8 years later, this woman who was in the streets has fixed herself. She's off the drugs. She has a job. She is responsible. She's now a responsible person. And she's decided she wants her child back. Now, here's the question. Does she have the right to tell that child that the last 7 years of its life were a lie? And what about the parents that took in and have grown and raised that child and loved that child dearly? What do you do about them? That's the story I wanted to write, because the really sad thing about that story is that there are absolutely no villains. Nobody is a bad guy. Everybody's trying to do the right thing. So we obviously had a villain who was trying to destroy the villages and all that kind of stuff. That was off to the side. But the emotional story between them was exactly that. Did Xena have a right to tell Solon that everything he had been told was a lie? That his father, Boreas, was noble at the end, but wasn't necessarily noble at the beginning. That, in fact, your mother is the one who has been built up to be this incredible, horrible person, and rightfully so. I'm destroying your childhood. Now, I had to have someone to be arguing with Xena on that point so we could get it out. And obviously, naturally, it was Gabrielle, because once again, Gabrielle was standing up to Xena. And there was the interchange between the two of them where Xena just got really angry at Gabrielle and said, you don't know what it's like to be a mother. And Gabrielle says, yes, but I know what it's like to be a daughter.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. There were no bad guys. And right up until the end, I think most people did not know whether Xena was going to tell him or not. And I will say that the way it was shot, but mostly, absolutely, the way that Lucy portrayed it, in that last scene, would you realize she's not going to tell him. And as she walks away, she turns toward the camera. And I will tell you, the look on Lucy's face still breaks my heart. The way Xena looks at that and you realize what has happened. She made a decision that hurt her to the core, but she did it because of love.
She knew that Solon must have a better life and she couldn't take his family from him. She knew this. It's really heartbreaking. The whole Solon history on the show, it's heartbreaking. I used to say that Solon have one of the most saddest plots on the entire show.
We've had a few, and you're correct. But that's why that the musical, and it's so weird that this is, when you write something, you create something, you're thinking certain things which to you are obvious, but you don't always know that it's obvious to everybody else. So as we were writing this, I didn't even think we talked about it in the meetings because to me it was kind of like, oh gosh, this makes total sense. Solon has created this musical world because he can sing to her and bring the love back between Gabrielle and Xena. And so, like I said, a couple of years ago when I mentioned that at a convention, the retreat, I actually had to stop because everybody was going, oh, and I was like, you don't know that? So, but it's an important part of it.
Yes, and it's a fantastic link. That's the first time that I actually think about the connection between the bittersweet and this scene in particular. It's really nice to know this. I'm gonna read another question
absolutely.
from a friend. I don't want to do much more of your time. I know we are already talking many hours. That's okay, but from the episodes that you wrote, which one you are the most proudest of? That you look at, oh my God, this one that I wrote, this is the best that I could ever wrote for the show. This one is my favorite. I wrote this and this one's perfect. That's one episode that picked it.
I'm going to have such a disappointing answer for this. I've been asked this many times, which one of my episodes is my favorite. I have never been one of those people who can do a list of favorites on anything, whether it's TV shows or even ask me what my favorite, car is or something like that. The reason is that they're all unique and different. And I will love every one of them for different reasons. And if I give you an answer right now, you can ask me that question in 5 minutes. I'll give you a different answer because it's really the context of how I'm feeling. I am proud of everything I have ever written. I'm not going to say all of them have been brilliant. I will say, however, that they touched me when I was writing them. They gave me this feeling, and I put as much effort as I could into those episodes, no matter what the show was. With Xena, I was able to expand myself quite a bit. All of us on that particular show were allowed to do that. So there's a lot of great episodes that are in that show. But for me to actually have a list of like the one that absolutely was the favorite, I don't know which one to tell you. The Price was a favorite because of the way it connected with me and, like I said, my relationship with my dad, knowing he was a soldier, but also what happened with Xena and Gabrielle. Orphan of War we just talked about. The Caesar stories, the ones that I wrote for the Caesar stories, I really liked those because one of those stories is absolutely, with the exception of like a 5-year gap, it would be considered historically accurate if you assume that there was a woman there that the men didn't want to write about. But as far as history is concerned, yeah, those things actually did happen. It was the one with Verkinix. Sometimes I forget the titles of the episodes because we use so many different titles. So I like that one from a historian's point of view. I like the episodes that have a little bit of a twist. When I wrote The Deliverer, I specifically designed that one so everybody would allow their own prejudices to take them in a different direction because they thought the episode was about Xena being obsessed with Caesar and trying to get revenge against Caesar, and the side story was this little thing with Gabrielle talking to this guy about what they thought was Christianity. Then at the end you find out, no, the story has been about that the entire time. And Xena's
Yes.
obsession with Caesar made it so that she couldn't see it. So I crafted that script and that story to specifically manipulate people, manipulate the audience, because I never said that Gabrielle was having this little flighty exploration of Christianity. All I said was the one God. And every God throughout history who has sought ultimate power has claimed they were the one God. And they all claimed to bring peace to the earth once they eliminated all the people they didn't like. So, in fact, the episode was more about Gabrielle. But the reactions I got from people on that honestly were very satisfying, because they were kind of like, oh my God, I didn't know this was going in that direction. Oh, wow, this is completely different. So I'm kind of like, hee, 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 hee. So yeah, every episode, you'd have to bring up a specific episode, and I could tell you why I love that particular episode or love having written it. But to ask me to form the list on it, yeah, I wish I could give an easy answer on that one. I mean, Dreamworker will always be a favorite because that was the first one that I wrote. And that was the one that pretty much got me into the show. So.
Okay, nice. And about the deliver, exactly my reaction the first time that I watched it. I couldn't believe that guy who seems so nice was actually the villain. I was like, oh my God, I want to kill him. And I believe Renee portrayed this moment when Gabrielle killed for the first time, the trauma, the look in her eyes when she looked at her hands full of blood. It's fantastic. As a fan, when we see on TV, it's kind of fantastic. I believe that must be really breathtaking when they are filming their records. It must be from another world, because when you saw on TV, it's something like, oh my God, no, she's so talented. We look at it on TV and say, she's so talented. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And you know, the interesting thing about that moment is that was set up in Dreamworker. And it's a theme that I've played with in other stories that I've written. And it has to do with this. You remember the opening of, was it Dreamworker? Yeah, what's Dreamworker? The opening of Dreamworker, Gabrielle has got Xena's sword and she's attacking a stump with it. And Xena tells her it's not a plaything, takes the sword away from her. And Gabrielle's kind of like, well, if I'm going to go on adventures, I should learn how to use a sword. That's like a child saying, you're going to teach me how to shoot the gun. It's like, no, because you don't understand the responsibility. And she gives her the rules of survival. You know, if you can run, run. If you can't run, you know, do this and then run. If you can't do this, talk yourself, you know, out, talk your way out of it. But then she says, but the moment you kill, everything changes. Now, that is true. Soldiers, people in law enforcement who have been forced to make that decision, that changes everything. You can read stories of historical figures where they will actually mention the first time they actually saw the person that they had to, you know, that this had to happen to. They will never forget it, ever. And so Xena was trying to tell her, this is something you don't understand yet, because you can't until you do it. And once you do that, you can never go back. Everything changes. And Gabrielle kind of takes it as like, well, of course things change, but she doesn't understand it because she's never experienced it. So that became the part of her blood innocence, because Morpheus was trying to get her to kill. Now, that became a huge thread in the Gabrielle character because I set it up in that particular script. So by the time we got to the Deliverer, when that did happen, and we did deliberately make it ambiguous, whether I think it was Meridian was the character, pushed into the dagger or whether Gabrielle stabbed her. We made it ambiguous. But for Gabrielle, it didn't matter. Somebody had died at her hand. And think about, suddenly, she realizes exactly what Xena was talking about way back then. She knows exactly. And if you remember, at the end of the episode, when she's lying there being held by Xena, she says everything's changed. Because she's reflecting on what Xena had told her way back then. She finally realized that she has crossed the threshold in her life that she can never go back to.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Another question.
Uh-huh.
Okay. In the writers' room, we know about the discussion between Xena and Gabrielle as a couple. They are a couple, they are not a couple. We know this discussion by the fans, but on the writers' room, this was a huge thing. That the writers were, oh no, this episode I don't wanna put a subtext. Oh my god, sorry.
Subtext.
Yeah, sorry. And this was really a thing on the writers' room, or was natural?
That's always been a good question because obviously it was there. When we started the series, okay. I want to reflect on, just real quickly, mention again, so many series that I've worked on before. And I come out of theater. So in the world of theater, things are much more liberal, they're much more open. People's orientation is not that big a deal. So when I started writing in television, several of the shows that I wrote for had, the leads were all the same gender. So like my first show, Riptide, there were 3 guys. They were all detectives. 2 of them were hunky guys. One of them was kind of a geeky guy. They lived on a boat and they solved crimes. And there was a fanzine that used to come out, because back then, before the internet, they literally wrote up fanzines and they mailed them to each other. And I noticed that a lot of the talk was about the relationship between the guys, that they had a bonding love. And I knew that a lot of my friends who were in the LGBT community also would look at that and say, yes, I can see that. And it's because it was a disenfranchised community that was looking for some sort of validation. So they would grab at anything that they could identify with. So when we started Xena, we were talking about what kind of audience we're going to have. And I happened to say in the meeting, I said, well, we're going to have a huge LGBTQ following. I think I just probably said gay following. That was before the acronym came into play. And nobody disagreed with me, but it was kind of like, really, you think so? And I said, oh yeah, absolutely. And I explained why. I said, all these series I've done, there is that disenfranchised community. And now what we didn't expect, was how big it became, how huge it became. But here's the important thing. When we recognized that this would be a part of it, we just said, all right, if it is, it is. We're not going to try to pander toward it. We're not going to try to write it that way deliberately, and we're not going to avoid it. What we're going to do is we're going to write a very natural relationship between 2 people, and let's see where that goes. And as it progressed, it was obvious where it was going. And it was just very natural. We were writing that way. As it went on, the reaction we were getting from people, especially the marginalized communities, we were happy with that. We were glad that they were actually able to grab something and find some fulfillment there. And so we thought, you know what? Let's, amongst us, say we're not going to ignore it. We're not going to push away from it, but we're not going to push onto it. We're not going to like suddenly throw it in everybody's faces. Let's just write it as normal. It's normal. And so the actors, Lucy and Renee, picked up on that. So they would put in little nuances, which were just little silent things, but you kind of went, wait a minute, I think I know what that means. I think I know where that's going. But it, again, made sense with the characters. So as this progressed, as the relationship progressed, we could not have written the characters any other way. That's, again, one of the reasons why it lasted so long. And we had both, the fans that we have, there are mixed groups. There's the subtext group, which looks at it and says this was an LGBTQ relationship. And then there's the main text that says, no, they are the best of friends. We deliberately designed it so that both sides could see that in the characters, because all we did was write something natural. But here was the big thing when I look back on it. We never did use any labels in their relationship, because in their world, those labels did not exist. The idea of a gay relationship, that didn't exist. It was a relationship. It was normal. As I pointed out to other people, we had a woman give birth to a centaur and nobody blinked. So, So if that's normal, something as simple as two people who are bonded together, that's got to be obvious. So, and there's a lot of stories which we don't have time for where I could talk about where people have brought this up to me. We've had discussions about it. And one person in particular loved the series, and she was not somebody who, she was conservative. She was not somebody who was prone to, follow those type of relationships, but she accepted them as being the closest of friends. And she was a pen pal of mine. She was a fan who had written to me, and so we were writing letters back and forth. And then one day, some friends told her that they felt that the characters were gay, and that bothered her. And so she wrote me a letter about it and saying she was really upset and distressed about this because she had just, these were wonderful characters, and now she finds this out. And so I wrote her a letter back, and I said, everybody finds something in the characters, but I said, let me just ask you this particular question. For the last, I think it was 2 years, for the last 2 years, you have written me letters about how wonderful these two characters are, how you actually identify with a lot of their friendship because you have friends that are very, very close to you. You have told me how much you love these characters. Then one person tells you something you didn't know about them, and that destroys everything that you loved about them? And I just sent that off to her, and I said, it's something to consider. So she sent me a letter. I mean, there was a long pause. I didn't hear from her, and I figured she probably wasn't watching the show. And she sent me a letter, and it was just wonderful. She sent me this letter, and she was a very, very Christian lady. She went to church. She's darling. What can I say? I really like her. But she sent me this letter that said that she had thought long and hard about all of this, and that she still watched the series. And she goes, every time I watch a series, I look for a message. And she said there was an episode that she watched, I forget which one, and she said, I realize the message is that it's not my place to judge other people. That if God creates someone, he creates them as they are and as they should be. And she says, I can never condone that lifestyle. She goes, but also I can't criticize it. And so I just sent her a note back and I said, that's all any one of us wants you to feel. It's like we have our lives. Let us live our lives and kind of like accept us for who we are. So and it was just a wonderful experience having that relationship. So yeah, we have a mixed bag, and it is interesting that that I get into conversations with people about this. But the cool thing about it with Xena fans, it's never an angry issue. They don't have anger toward each other. Main text, subtext. They get together, have a debate, and then let's go get ice cream. It's
fantastic. In Brazil, we have some argue that some people that we see that is kind of prejudice, but when I see is the problem of the person, this person is seeing a problem because her style, she's a prejudiced person. The problem is not the show, the problem is not the feeling of the character, the problem is in the person. Because if you look at me and say, oh, Xena is gay and that's a problem. The problem is not the character. The problem is it's in you. Let Xena and Gabrielle be happy. There's a lot of other shows that you can watch and there's no gay relationships on the show. Yeah. So if you have a problem with this relationship, with this view, just don't watch. Yeah. It's so simple. Just don't watch. And what I believe that the fans who have different POVs about that, we can talk in peace. We talk respectful. We are respectful with each other, and that's great. If you tell me right now, no, Xena and Gabrielle are not a good match. I prefer Xena and Aries. Okay, it's good for you. I don't prefer Aries, but it's okay, and we're gonna talk in a peaceful way. But there are people who, at least here in my country, that are kind of complicated views and complicated lives, and they wanna make this bigger. It's not that bigger. It's not the end of the world. It's not, oh my God, it's just two people who are living their lives, and Xena and Gabrielle are happy with each other, and that's it, that's life. And
Yeah.
it's wonderful.
Well, I was one of the people who was one of the creators of the series. Well, creators of the series. I didn't create the series, but I molded it. I was one of the writers of the series. I get asked the question a lot because people like, well, he must have the definitive answer. He can say yes or no. And usually I respond to people, I say, well, what is it to you? What does it mean to you? And if they say, well, I see them as being the best of friends, and I'm like, then that's what they are. They are the best of friends. I see them as being soulmates and lovers, then that's what they are. Because the series was not about that, but that series could not have happened without the overlay of their relationship. And you can interpret that relationship. As I said, we never put a label on it. We never said, oh yeah, that's what it is. And everything that these characters went through are mirrored in real people's lives, whether they believe in the subtext or not. There are mirrors in their lives that they can find. But you're correct. It's like, if this bothers you, then the two things I would say is like, well, first of all, if it bothers you, you shouldn't be watching it. But secondly, I would ask you, why aren't you watching it? Why did you feel you had to make a decision based on that? And analyze that, because as you said, the problem's probably with you. And I don't want to, I don't want to criticize too many people for having a response and an emotional response, but I think you always need to examine where those things come from, because if they're not something that's good, if it keeps you from something that otherwise is a wonderful thing, then you're doing a disservice for yourself. But that's me.
Yeah, but I agree with you. It's exactly this. I gonna make you only two more questions because we are running out of time.
That's because we're having fun.
Oh my God. There's a thing that my friends didn't ask, but I wanna know. Unfortunately, some of people who work on the show, they already passed away, like Kevin, like Alex Arquette. And if you could you share a memory with them? No, just I really believe they are really missed.
Yeah.
What happened to Kevin was terrible. Could you have a memory, a special memory with him, with another actor that was on the show and unfortunately is not here with us anymore?
Yeah, we've had a few people who have left, unfortunately. Rob Trevor, who played Salmonius, he died just recently. I didn't know Alexis, but I certainly knew Kevin, who played Ares, Kevin Smith, and I certainly knew Rob Trevor, because we knew each other here in Los Angeles. We'd run into each other at conventions, or we'd hang out and we'd have lunch. Kevin was an amazing person. I mean, first of all, gorgeous, so incredibly attractive. I remember at Lucy's wedding, I went up to him and I just made the joke and I said, do you realize how many women around the world want to sleep with you right now? And he laughed and he blushed and he just went, oh, get on with you, mate. And he kind of waved it off and walked away. He was just a down-to-earth, wonderful person. And when we would talk at conventions, there was a convention that was it wasn't illegal, but it wasn't a legitimate recognized convention. There was a convention called WarriorCon, which was celebrating Xena, but it couldn't be XenaCon because obviously that's, the studio runs those, or Creation Entertainment does their work with those, and those are always fun. But we had a chance to hang out. Kevin was there, Carl Urban was there, and we just hung out and, had drinks, breakfast in the morning, and getting to know Kevin and just how witty he was, how incredibly smart he was, and of course how talented he was. You just got this great feeling from him. And yes, there are a couple of stories I could probably tell, but I can't tell. which was like nothing criminal, but they were certainly funny and just kind of like, Carl and Kevin together, boy, they just had some wicked humor. So, but anyway, I remember when we were doing a convention when this happened, and when Kevin had his accident, and he was in the hospital, and we were all backstage, a bunch of us, and we all had our phones, and we were keeping up with what was going on because we knew that he was on life support. And Bruce Campbell was there, I was there, Renee was there. Lucy wasn't there at the moment. And then we got the news that he had passed away. And I was standing next to Bruce Campbell, and Bruce, keep in mind, we're backstage. All the fans are out there waiting. And Bruce made the comment, he said, well, at least we were together when we found out. And of course, I looked around to all of us backstage and I said, yeah, I said, at least that. And he looks at me, goes, no, no, no. And he gestures toward the fans and he says, we're all together. And that still kind of like touches me because he was so right. So then we went out to on stage to announce it and do the memorial, and Lucy was on a speakerphone. So we all talked a little bit about Kevin. But it was the loss of somebody who was not just somebody who was a friend or somebody who was a work associate. We all recognized that the potential that Kevin had was now lost. And everybody in that room, everybody around the world lost it at the same time. And we never knew what it was going to be, but we knew it was going to be something exceptional. And, Kevin was just amazing. Rob Treber was another person. He loved the fans. I used to be able to do a good imitation of Rob Treber. My voice right now won't allow me to do it, but literally I could talk like him. He was a very unique person. He was very much Salmonius. The interactions he and I had to do a touch-up and rewrite on one particular script the first time he appeared on Xena. And I had been told that Rob sometimes would rearrange your dialogue. And so I was like, okay, well, I've run into that before. Actors have done that before. On Xena, it was kind of certainly wasn't as bad as it had been on other shows. On Xena, it was actually pretty good. They respected our scripts on Xena. And so I'm like, okay, well, I've dealt with this before. So when Rob Treber did the role, it was almost verbatim. It was almost exactly what had been written. And so when I was in New Zealand, he and I had lunch, and I mentioned this to him. I said, I was told you were going to be difficult with the dialogue. And he gave me a great compliment. He said, you get my character. And we talked about that. He was extremely creative and extremely smart. And what he was referring to is that when you write dialogue for a character, you don't write the dialogue just for the moment. It has to reflect the entire lifetime that that person has had. So that when Salmonius, for example, would express himself, he would express himself as Salmonius. He wouldn't say, I think we need to get out of here because the bad guys are coming. That's not the way he would say that. Salmonius was a businessman. He would say something like, I think we need to cut our losses, grab our profits, and move to another location. So I was writing with that in mind. Now, it wasn't that wasn't happening on Hercules. They were writing as well. They were doing a great job with him. But Rob Treber was more ingrained into the Hercules community, so he probably had more connection with the writers and probably had, his point with me was that he had never worked with me before and that I managed to hit that level, which I said was, again, an incredible compliment the more I learned about how creative he was. I saw him in other plays that he was doing where he did not play a comedic character. He played dark characters, and the transition was amazing. So when Rob Treber found out that he had this illness that eventually led to his death, which was years ago, he was in the hospital, and I went to visit him. And, I'm walking in thinking, okay, well, this is not great news. They got something they want to do with him, so they can hopefully fix this. And so I'm thinking, I've got to give the whole cheer up kind of thing, and I don't know, it's like, can I pull that off? I walked in, and it was like he was determined to cheer me up. He had this big smile on his face, And we talked, and he was telling me, and he said, "Oh," he says, "look, I want you to take some photos of me lying here in the bed with the gown on and everything." And he was holding a Time magazine, which weirdly enough, on the cover, it had something that says, "Is it time to die?" Talking about dying. And he's holding it up, and he's got this big grin on his face like he's reading this. And he says, "Take some pictures." He goes, "I think the fans will get a kick out of this." What he was trying to do is he was trying to make sure people out there were not worried about him, that they weren't going to be sad because of him. He was still Robert Trubber. And I've never posted those photos, and I never will, actually, because at this particular moment, that's kind of a painful thing. But I was just so incredibly impressed with the fact that the true colors of Robert Trubber was this incredibly delightful, wonderful person who just wanted to bring a smile to everyone's face or wanted to touch them somehow emotionally so they could feel good about themselves.
That's amazing. They are really missing everyone, and
Yeah.
just for God knows what he must do, but they are really missing, and they always will be.
Yeah. Yeah, there's completely irreplaceable. Just, yeah.
Just to our final question.
Yes.
It was hard when you left the show. You worked there for 5 seasons.
Mhm.
You're a producer, writer, and make so many friends, have so many special moments there. But it was hard when you, okay, now it's time to move on, or was kind of easy? Said, okay, my job is done, and now I can go to another level of my career, maybe.
Yeah, heck with it. Xena. No, it was very difficult. The reasons around, the circumstances around why I left the show is every person wants to develop their own series, and they want to create their own series. Every writer does. I had had many deals with networks and studios up until that point, developing my ideas. None of them went to production, but I was paid for them. I was able to write the scripts for the most of them, so I'd had plenty of those deals. And I approached Rob Tappert about the idea of perhaps I would create something for his company, for him and Sam, Renaissance, Pacific Renaissance, and that we could produce it. We'd produce it together. And if Rob wanted to co-create with me, absolutely fantastic. I wouldn't mind that at all. But they did not have room for a pilot commitment for me. I'm not going to argue that. I understand the responsibilities and the budgets of production companies. You just sometimes don't. So he said, "No, we can't do that." He goes, "But I want to renew your contract, and there's a bunch of perks that come with that," which was great. So I said, I am going to look for some other opportunities. And he said, "Oh, okay." He understood that. So at that time, Sony TriStar Studios, they had the rights to the Xena character, Xena, Queen of the Jungle. And they wanted to develop a new series. And they had brought on Doug Schwartz, and Doug was the one of the creators of Baywatch. And so Doug and I had met a long time ago. We got along fine. We had completely different styles of storytelling, but merging them would be actually pretty cool. So he contacted me and he said, "Look, I've already got this sold over at Sony. I want you to come in and co-create it with me." And I was like, all right. So I started taking meetings with them. And eventually that deal did happen. They said, "Okay, we want to move forward with this. Steve, we want you to write the pilot. You and Doug can write it. You will be the exec producers. You'll create this." And now I was very upfront. I told Rob every step of the way what was going on. Now, anybody else would have fired me because they would technically have said, "Well, you're developing a series which actually is supposed to be a competitor. It's a competition against Xena, because you're talking about a strong female lead adventure, and you will be." So he had every right to say, "Okay, you're done. Bye-bye." But he didn't. Rob kept me on my contract as long as he could, because I like to think it's because he valued what I was bringing to Xena. And if this project with Sony did not go through, if we didn't shoot the pilot, then he didn't want me to leave. And so during this entire development I was working technically for 2 studios developing a competitor, Rob kept me on. And there were certain things that eventually I couldn't be privy to. There were some story meetings I could not go to because they were developing storylines that if I did leave the show, they didn't want anybody to know. And that was all. We all understood that. Nobody had a problem with it. I certainly did not have a problem with it. So what happened at a certain point was that Rob had to make a decision. The project at Sony had been delayed. So the answer was not going to be for several more months. And Rob had to make a decision because he needed to fill my spot for the next season. For coming up on the 6th season, he had to fill my spot. Alex Kurtzman and Bob Orkey were already producing over on Hercules, and they were going to come over and replace me if I left. And I told Rob, I said, you've been great about this. Yeah, you have to make a decision. Don't worry about me. And so he made the decision to go ahead and release me from my contract. And Alex and Bob came over and picked up where I left off, picked up the scripts that I had been writing at the time. There were 2 that I was working on at the time, and they picked those up. Now, as for how it affected me, yeah, it did. Yes, it was exciting that I had a new series that I could go. And that's a whole other story about that particular series, and because that was not as easy as an experience as the Xena experience was. It was different. There were just some other problems with it. But I remember my last few days, I had to clean out my office. And that was the same office I had been in for 5 years, 5.5, 6 years, the same office. And I had to clean it out. And so I cleaned everything out of it the last day. I stood in the doorway and I took pictures of that completely empty room because that's what it looked like when I walked in. And I left. And yeah, it was very painful. I was leaving a lot behind. I also knew that I wouldn't be able to watch the series for a long time because of all the memories, and that if I watched any of the new episodes, I would either be pissed off that I wasn't there to be a part of it, or I'd be pissed off that they didn't make a choice that I liked. And to this day, I actually haven't watched the 6th season. I have no idea. Well, I do know what happened, but I have not watched any of the episodes. But that was, Xena was, of all the shows I've worked on, aside from the first show that got me into my career, that one was pivotal. So much of my life changed with that show. We're having this conversation 25 years after it has been canceled, and you and I are talking about this because you have a passion for it. So many people out there have a passion for it. I have met so many people who were fans and are actually true friends of mine, not just that we're friendly, because I like to think I'm friendly with everybody, but I mean, literally, I've got like a couple of my best friends. They started out as fans, and they've done house sitting for me. We've traveled together. We've had just a fantastic time. So much of my life changed that this literally is not something I can look back on Xena and saying, oh, if I didn't do Xena, I would have done this and things would have still progressed. No, absolutely. Things would have been different. I would like to think that I still would be developing, and because I'm developing projects now, I still have projects I'm working on. Because of my personality and my drive, sure, I was going to be doing that. However, the change that happened in my life because of Xena is, I don't know how to put it. It's irreplaceable. So much has happened for me, and I am so grateful for the situations and the little tiny things that happened that brought me into the show. And there were a lot of little things that were kind of like, well, that doesn't seem like a big deal, turned out to be a big deal. Literally the way I got into the show, how I was brought into the first meeting was just because of a friend of mine who happened to be the producer of the first show I ever worked on, and she was working on Xena. She said, come on in and meet everybody. That led to all of this. So yeah, there's not a part of my life today that has not been affected in a major way by that show. I mean, I'm looking around my office right now, and of course I've got my shop room hanging on the wall here. Here's my girls over here. I got my Funko Pops up there. I certainly have all the scripts, and I have all the gifts that fans have sent me over the years or given to me at conventions. I have them all. I'm not going to get rid of them. So yeah, I don't know how to explain it, except that the path that I ended up taking was by far the most fantastic choice I could ever have made, and honestly, I didn't make that choice. Life made it for me, and I just took advantage of it.
That's amazing. Just your can I ask about your wife? She's a Xena fan?
No, and this is okay. This is a funny thing. She is a fan, but she's not like a fan. Okay. So here was the weird thing. Through all of these years, I have, God, you're going to learn more about me than you should. I'm not a very aggressive person where it comes to relationships. In other words, I'm not the kind of guy that will go up and bother a woman, you know, like, hey, how are you doing? I want to talk to you. If I go to a bar and a woman is sitting there reading a book, I assume she wants to read the book and I leave her alone. So, and if somebody is interested in me, it literally, you have to hit me over the head with a hammer. I just don't see it. I don't think of myself that way. So generally, the relationships I've had most of the time, where they don't include dating clubs, another story, have been of the people I meet. So as I said, at a lot of the conventions, I've met a lot of Xena fans, and some of them have become friends. At least 3 of them became relationships, where they were actual relationships, where we met each other, we liked each other, we got involved, and we dated for a year, year and a half, something like that. That happened at least 3 times, maybe 4. Now, the running gag, though, was I was not out there pursuing relationships among fandom. I wasn't the kind of producer that's like, ooh, okay, I can sleep with whoever I want. That was definitely not happening. But I ended up with these relationships. So they didn't work, and nobody was a bad guy. In fact, most of the relationships I had with Xena fans, or with the Xena fans, with the 3 or 4, they're still friends. They're on my Facebook. We chat all the time. We've run into it. Like if I'm visiting their area, we have lunch together. So, all the relationships are good. But the funny thing was that when I would go to the conventions, if I had a new girlfriend, they would, of course, have a chance to meet Lucy and Renee and, the other people because they're hanging with me. And so later on, when I met Jessica, who's my wife, it was a completely different story. And she is amazing. She is absolutely everything I've been looking for in my entire life. And she just there she is. So everybody loves her because she's so real. Renee just, thinks she's wonderful. But here was the thing. I had dinner with Renee one time. We were talking about this. And I said, you met Jessica. You love Jessica. But I said, so tell me, all these years I kept showing up at a convention and I would have a new girlfriend and they were like a Xena fan. What were you guys thinking? How were you looking at me and saying, what is he doing? And she just said, well, she goes, I think we just felt you were looking for the right person and you just, it was going to happen. And I went, okay, good. That's actually true. That was the explanation. So now with Jessica, this is so non-Xena, I apologize. With Jessica, I met her because of a project I was working on with the author Kevin J. Anderson. Kevin is a science fiction author. He writes all of the, he and Brian Herbert write all the Dune sequel books from the original Dune series. But he's got his own amazing career. He's got all these books he's written. He's well known throughout the world. And he and I became friends. We met at a convention. We just hit it off and became friends. So we worked on a project together, which ultimately ended up in a graphic novel called Stalag X. And I have it over there. I'm not going to go and get it, but I have a copy of it. And Stalag X was a science fiction about a concentration camp in the future. It's very gritty. It is very, very much not a kid's comic book. So when it was published, we went through 3 publishers, but one of the publishers released a digital version of it as a debut. And I was appearing at Denver Comic-Con when they did this. So I was there to sign these little digital copies, little placards they had with the digital address. And I met a guy there named Peter Wax, and Peter was also an author. He and I hit it off, and we thought, we'll work on something together. So we started working on a project together. Next year, I'm back at Denver Comic-Con with Peter, and there's this girl working at the booth that we're at. This is the Wordfire Publishing booth. I'm really trying to make this story short. I apologize.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it's okay.
so this girl, she's what they call a booth babe. And a booth babe is an attractive woman who wears like a really nice outfit. In her case, it was like a Renaissance fair type of outfit. And the little geeky boys out there and the geeky girls want to get her phone number. And so they walk up to talk to her. And then when they walk away, they realize they didn't get her phone number, but they bought a book. How did that happen? Because she's smart. So anyway, I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, I like this person. Okay. Now, that was Jessica. And so I'm trying to figure out, when do I have a chance to even try to talk to her? Because we're at this booth. It's a business. So at the end of the first day, Peter was running the booth. Again, it was for Wordfire Publishing. And so he says, look, myself and this other guy named Mark, they're going to shut down the booth. But he goes, why don't you and Jessica go across the street and get a table at the restaurant? We'll come and join you. And I'm thinking, here's my chance. You know, we're going to walk over there. Now, I am horrible with this. You know, pick up lines. I am so bad at this. I'm such a child. I'm just like, I'm sure I'm cute and endearing because of how bad I am at this. So as we're walking over there, I'm trying my best to, like, you know, hey, I'm doing all that kind of crap. And she recognizes it. And she turns to me and she says, you do realize that I'm dating Peter, my partner.
Oh my God.
Now, this was my reaction. I looked at her and I went, oh, okay, thank God. We don't have to do any of this crap. Let's just talk. And that was it. So we sat there and we got to know each other as friends. And then Peter and Mark came and joined us, and that was it. It was all friends. Now, she lived in Denver at the time. So when I left and went back to Los Angeles, we friended each other on Facebook and we kept in touch. And Peter knew about this. He was fine with it. And we were friends. So we would chat on Facebook every now and then, maybe on the phone. So Peter was out in Los Angeles here, staying with me as we were working on this project one night. And I had finished chatting with Jessica online. And I walked into the kitchen where Peter was, and I said, yeah, I was flirting with your girlfriend. And Peter says, oh, you know, actually, we're not a thing anymore. We broke up. And my reaction was not what you would think. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, here's my chance. My reaction was like, oh my God, you should have told me. Oh, what did I say? I don't want to be a problem here. Wow, why didn't you tell me this? I was really concerned about my friendships because I was afraid that I might lose Peter and I might lose Jessica as friends. And Peter was like, it's not a problem. No, it was a mutual thing. We decided to break up. So that night, he and I went to a coffee shop and he went off to make a phone call. And he comes back and he says, I was just talking to Jessica on the phone. And I'm like, okay, well, how's she doing? And he said, well, she asked me a very interesting question. And I went, okay, what was that? And she said, this is what she asked me. What do I have to do to let Steve know I'm interested in him?
Oh.
And I looked at Peter and I went, I have never been set up by an ex-boyfriend. And he said, you should probably call her. She wants to talk. And so I called her that night, and that started our relationship, which led to a true relationship, led to her moving out here to Los Angeles because she got a great job out here. And then we got married, and it is so incredibly wonderful. And all of that was just a small thing that happened, but led to this incredible thing. And she's an author. So when she and I travel together or just sit around talking, we go off into these fantasy worlds where we'll talk about a story she's developing or one I'm developing, and we'll talk about working on stories together. So we have that little magical playroom of creativity. So yeah, I know a lot of people rightfully say they are the luckiest person for the person they found. I truly am the luckiest person for the person I found.
That's so cute. That's
She's incredible.
Really cute. Oh my God. So, but she was not exactly a fan of Xena. She was, you were there on Xena. It was not, oh my God, it's not like that.
Yeah, and it was like, it wasn't that she didn't like the show. She watched the show, but she was not necessarily going to be going to the convention, a Xena convention. She attended a lot of conventions because she was an author and because she worked in the booths. So, you know, she was at a lot of conventions. But she liked the show. And one of the things that people in the film and television business have to deal with, especially if you are of a producer level, is as I said, I had relationships perhaps with three, well, I said three, maybe four, over the course of 25 years. However, I have been approached by hundreds of people, not because of Steve, but because of the producer. They completely misread what I am. They don't know who I am. They just know that I created these shows, that I was a co-exec producer for this show, an exec producer for that show, that I'm a celebrity. They don't know me. And the first thing I try to do is tell them, no, I'm not what you think I am. But they're enamored by the celebrity aspect of it. And so they approach me, and yes, you end up with a lot of offers. And I can say that unless I have a connection with anybody, that means nothing to me. I'm kind of like, yeah, go away. This happens. So that is something that someone like myself always has to question. Do you really like me, or are you liking me so you can meet Lucy and Renee, which does happen. So with Jessica, it wasn't that at all. She was kind of like, hey, I've been around famous people before. I don't care. I like you, which was really, and it was very hard for me to get used to that idea that somebody would actually like me.
No, but well, you deserve all the love in the world, and I'm pretty sure she makes you happy, and that's the most important thing. The love, to build a relationship with love and respect is the most important thing ever. And you're really lucky, and this so cute. I totally ship you and Jessica.
Mm-hmm.
It's my new ship now, just fantastic. Really nice story.
She is great. She's over there in her office right now. I was gonna like, we're talking about you. Ha 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 ha.
Just to finish, could you send a message to all Brazilian fans that gonna listen these messages? No, just to a producer, to the fans here. I know Brazil is a really far from what you're probably accustomed, but could you leave a message for the Brazilians, Xena fans?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, the very simplest message, which encapsulates the last couple of hours that we've been talking, is that, we love you. I love you. And it's not just because you love a show that I did. It's because you have passion, you have feeling, you're not shallow in this. You look for those connections. When we were talking earlier, we were talking about that you find connections that are mirrored in other movies and things like that. We may not have intended to make those connections, but the reason those are in those other movies is because they emotionally affect people, and we were doing the similar thing. We weren't copying them directly, but we were doing a similar thing. So we were actually, we're touching on those same things that you're responding to. But I will say this for the Brazilian fans. I was surprised when I saw how many of them there are. It started on my Facebook feed. I started to get tagged in things, and I was looking at that, and I'm saying, well, that's Portuguese. And I was checking people's profiles, and I'm like, oh, okay, Brazilian, good. There goes all the lessons I took in Spanish right out the window. But then I started to see more and more comments from people from Brazil. And I don't know how to put this, except it just put this real silly grin on my face, because in an interesting sense, the show has transcended cultures and boundaries. And I think, especially in North America, we are so guilty of ignoring the fact that South America even exists. And that's so wrong. I remember putting up a map one time comparing the United States to Brazil. People were going, oh my God, it's huge. I'm like, yeah, it's huge. And I said, and you also take a look at how many cultural boundaries and differences there are in that one nation. So yeah, I wish there was a simple way I could say this, except to say that I love you because of who you are and the fact that you have a passion. That's the thing that means so much to me, that people have a passion about something. That it's Xena, fantastic, but I know you have passions about other things. God, I don't want to get too philosophical about it, but without that type of passion and belief in yourself, and belief in others and passion for feeling what other people feel and identifying with them, whether it's through art, whether it's through television, whether it's through anything, that's, in my mind, that's the whole reason why we're here. Otherwise, what's the point? So yeah, I think the Brazilian fans are a very, very good example about that. And it is true of other our fandoms that also exist around the world. But I don't know why it is, but every time I see Portuguese written, it's almost like everything should have an exclamation point because everything is like exciting. It's almost kind of like yeah. I mean, maybe it's just the way that the cultural phraseology is, but it is kind of like a bunch of people getting to say together, and instead of complaining about something, they're going like, "Oh my gosh, did you know about this? Oh, this is so exciting! I can't believe this. This is really great." Da, 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 da. So that's my impressions. But no, you are appreciated. Believe me. So you asked me a simple question that I took like 10 minutes to answer.
No, it's okay. And we are really thankful for all the love and all the attention that you and everybody from the show gives the fan. You know, when Lucy and Renee were here in Brazil and they visited Rio, we could feel how honored, and they were really happy, and that's really amazing. We feel grateful to give this chance to show how loved they are. They are really loved here and all over the world, of course. But talking about myself, the Brazil is a really affection people. We have this this interaction. We like to show how much we're important, and this is really special for us. We wanna make this really, really happen, and I'm really grateful for your time, for this hour that we have this chat and amazing, amazing tales from the show. And we are really happy to celebrate 30 years of Xena Princess with you. 30 years is a lifetime. No, it's a whole lifetime. 30 years is a mark, and it's incredible how still here and still celebrating and giving love to you and receive love from everyone. It's amazing, just fantastic, and we love you and we thank you a lot for your time, and
Absolutely.
I'm really feel really more than happy. Just I'm delightful by this moment. I'm really, really happy. And
Well,
it's sad to say goodbye. The conversation was great, but
let me wrap up. Let me wrap this up with one thing here, though. Remember when we first started talking, way back, the beginning of this thing, and you said that you were very nervous that you were talking to me. It's like, oh, very nervous and very excited.
Yeah.
Remember I told you about the two types of Xenites, the ones who go, I think that's him, and the other one that's, hi, Steve. You went from that to, hi, Steve. You and I are friends. So if I'm down there, or if you ever come up here to the States and we run into each other, you don't have to be nervous with me. We're friends. We had a nice long chat here. So we know each other. And all I have to do is, and I'm lousy with remembering names, although yours is very, very unique and very beautiful. But yeah, if you see me someplace, you just come up and say, hey. And I'm like, hey, want to go have lunch? That's the whole point. You know, that's how I like, that's the best part of fandom for me, is to go from that, oh my gosh, he's this. And then you realize, no, he's actually kind of like me, you know, because I think you're pretty unique and fascinating.
Thank you. Oh my God, thank you. It's really sad, but I really must say goodbye now. My kids are on school waiting for me.
Go do that.
Oh my God, but I really say thank you, and it's gonna be amazing video when we add thing and put online. It's gonna be amazing.
I will put it on there. It's going to be a large file, but I'll put it up there, and you can download it. We'll figure out some way that you can get it.
I thank you, and
absolutely.
Hello to you, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
I'm gonna see each other, and I hope I have another chance to talk more with you.
Sure, we'll figure it out. We'll put it together. So this was fun. I appreciate it.
Hi, me too.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. How I turn off?
Oh, this is cool. Since I'm the one that's running this thing, I could just leave you hanging. I could just let you sit there. I'm going to cancel. Hold on a second. And we're about to end now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
As recomendações deles mudarão o mundo. Xenites recomendam.